Daniel Sports Central, we go over a college football game preview and prediction on the weekend matchup between the Tennessee Vols and the Alabama Crimson Tide. Two teams that have been on a roller coaster so far this season. Both teams are one-loss teams to this point. Two teams that heading into the season were considered big national contenders. And both teams are still in college football playoff contention, but obviously the pressure is on at this point in the season. The loser of this game is more than likely eliminated from college football playoff contention. The winner remains in the background for the college football playoff, but obviously every game is huge from here on out. We'll be going over a full game preview and prediction on this matchup here today. Let's get started with their team trends. Tennessee beat Texas A&M last week 20-13. Big win for the Vols. Texas A&M is a decent football team that has taken a couple of close losses. They're 4-3 in the season at this point, but still a big win for the Vols. They're 5-1 overall, 2-1 in conference. But Alabama on the other side, this team beat Arkansas 24-21, but it was not a pretty win. Only won it by 3, and Arkansas is now a 2-5 football team. They just have not been good this season, and that's a team that you probably shouldn't let hang around if you want to be a big college football playoff contender. But I will say, though, the Crimson Tide have gotten better to this point in the season. You consider where this team was at in those first 3 matchups or so. And then they had the huge win over Ole Miss, really impressive there. And then dominant win over Mississippi State, beat Texas A&M on the road, a nice win there. And then this kind of started to give people doubts again about the Tide, winning that matchup by 3 and letting Arkansas hang around for as long as they did. But Alabama is still a team that I just can't doubt on, with Nick Saban being the coach. And I know Milroe has been less than impressive in comparison to many Alabama quarterbacks in years past. But the Crimson Tide should not be counted out quite yet. This is a big match for both teams. I think it's safe to say the loser of this matchup is really eliminated from college football playoff and national contention. I mean, they're still in SEC contention, especially Alabama if they lose this matchup. But obviously, I mean, both teams having one loss to this point, that really raises the stakes of this matchup. But games beyond the 21st in Tuscaloosa. Kickoff is 3:30 Eastern. Spread's going with Alabama by 9.5. Over-under is 47.5, and the FPI's going with the Tide as well, 76%. So I will say, though, the Crimson Tide being favored by about 10 points does surprise me a bit. I mean, I think Alabama is they're a talented football team for sure, but when you consider how inconsistent this team has been at times, and Tennessee's a team that has only gotten better so far this season as well, I do think the spread is a bit heavy towards the Tide there. Series history, Alabama leads at 58-39. Tennessee obviously won last year's matchup in what was just an incredible game in Knoxville with major national contention implications. And that's honestly, if I think back to the 2022 season, that is definitely one of the most memorable games that I remember. Probably the first game that comes to mind when I think of the regular season last year. But, you consider both teams offensively have struggled at points this season. I will say about the spread as well, having Alabama favored by that much in a game that probably won't be quite as high scoring. That is something to keep in mind as well. Stat comparison, Tennessee 22nd in points per game, 16th in points allowed. This is a strong rushing team, not quite as strong in the passing game as they were last season. Joe Milton's been good this year, but not quite on the same level that, say, Hendon Hooker was last year. But, you consider where Joe Milton was with Michigan a few years ago, not considered a very great quarterback. He's definitely improved as well, and that was kind of the same with Hendon Hooker when he was at Virginia Tech. So that's definitely something that I think should be not overlooked, and something that should be praised of this coaching staff with Tennessee, is how they've been able to improve quarterbacks and develop them into excellent starters. But obviously for Tennessee, a strong rushing team. Jalen Wright, the lead in the backfield with 570 yards so far this season. And for the Tide on the other side, this team is 11th in points allowed, one of the strongest defenses in the country so far this season. Not quite on the same level as maybe a Michigan or even a Penn State, I would say, but they've been impressive at points this season. Offensively, though, this team has been inconsistent. There's no denying that. You consider the Arkansas game, should have scored more points there. And especially the South Florida game. Obviously, this team was working through a few quarterback problems there, but still, only 17 points against South Florida is something that I can't forget about. But since they have put up a couple of impressive performances, but defensively, this team has shined more than the offense, I would say, at points this season. Your recent matchups, Tennessee, obviously the big win over Texas A&M, dominant against UTSA and South Carolina. I mean, so this team has been better since the Florida loss. That Florida loss was ugly for sure, and this team already being underwhelming in the first couple of games of the season, it wasn't terribly surprising to see them lose that game, but since then, this team, I would say, has been better. So that is a good sign for the Vols. But for Alabama, beat Arkansas, beat Texas A&M, dominant against Miss State. Ole Miss, that was a huge win there, 24-10. Honestly, I wasn't sure that they were going to win that matchup, especially after the only 17-3 win over South Florida. But I mean, this team has shown promise. They can be great, and Nick Saban's the coach. That's a big reason why it's just so tough to doubt this team, and they shouldn't be counted out quite yet. Your key points: Tennessee 5-1. They have improved a lot since their 2-1 start. I will say that last week was a bit closer, but Texas A&M is still a good football team. So, I mean, I'd still say that was a good win for this team, but otherwise, this team definitely has been better since their 2-1 start. They're not quite as dominant as they were last season. There's no hiding that either. This team isn't quite as big of a contender this season as they were last year, and that's just how it's going to be. I mean, this team still has got opportunities to prove me differently and prove everyone differently. I mean, they got Alabama this week, obviously Missouri on the road in a few weeks, and then Georgia at home. That's a huge game coming up in late November where they really have a chance to put themselves on the map. But obviously it starts in this matchup, and I feel like if Tennessee can win this game, I mean, suddenly this team jumps right back up to being a big contender in the SEC, even though they've definitely been a background team for the majority of this season so far. But for Alabama on the other side, they've been on a roller coaster. This is a very beatable Alabama team, very much more so than in past years and of any Nick Saban coach team. I can't remember a Nick Saban team in a very long time that has been this inconsistent and has had this much uncertainty. I feel like the quarterback situation has been a pretty big question mark at this point. Jalen Milroe's shown potential, but he hasn't been that same quarterback as many excellent top-tier quarterbacks we've seen out of Alabama in recent time. But offensively, though, bottom line, this team got to be better if they want to be a college football playoff team. And even at this point, the college football playoff hopes have definitely started to fade for the Tide. But, I mean, I've said this in my rankings videos. This is a season that is as deep of talent as we've seen in a very long time. There aren't 2 or 3 teams at the top that I'm just so confident in that they'll win a national title. I mean, Georgia, Michigan, Washington are my top 3 right now. I think I've got Georgia number 3 this week, Michigan 1, Washington 2. And bottom line, there's so much depth around the country this season. You never know what's going to happen. And there are 10 or 11 different teams that could win the title this season. I really do believe that. But for Alabama, I mean, this is a critical game for them to remain in college football playoff contention, at least in fringe college football playoff contention. They got to get a couple more big wins down the stretch if they really want to remain a big national contender. But with that, let's get the prediction here for Tennessee and Alabama coming up here in Week 8 of action. I think Alabama being at home does help them in this game, considering the history and how dominant they've been against Tennessee for majority of recent time. But with that, I do want to go with Alabama 24-21. It's going to be a close matchup. I think the spread is going way too heavily on Alabama here. I think Tennessee absolutely covers the spread. They're going to keep this game close. They have been better since mid-September, and this team very much has improved. I feel like both teams have improved despite being inconsistent, but Alabama's going to get the win here by 3, 24-21. I still feel like this definitely shouldn't be a super high-scoring game in comparison to last year's matchup. Both offenses just not quite as good as they were last year, but 24-21, I do think Tide win it. Over under 47.5. I'm taking the under in Tennessee to cover the spread for sure in this matchup. That's definitely something that I'm pretty confident in here, especially with it being not a super high-scoring matchup. It's reasonable to take Alabama if you think it's going to be a high-scoring game, but I do think Tennessee finds a way to keep this game close, and I mean, they're talented enough to do so. So all things considered, a massive matchup for both teams, and I'm going to go with Alabama in the end. But with that, let me know your thoughts and comments below on this matchup, your score predictions, all of that. And stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. I'll catch you on the next one.